Listen, someone's broken into my house. Call 911.
Is this the Payne residence?
Yes, someone's broken into my house. They're still here. You have to...
Good. I'm afraid I cannot help you.
Who is this? Hello?
So after Max Payne, you'd expect there to be some kind of sequel. After all, the first game won all kinds of awards and was something of a sleeper hit. Sure enough, in 2003, Remedy Entertainment released Max Payne 2: The Fall of Max Payne for Microsoft Windows, with a port also completed for the PS2 and the Xbox. Now what this game does is make a few adjustments to the formula while still keeping the overall theme and tone in line with the original game. Most notably, instead of a snowstorm, the entire game takes place during a thunderstorm, with a blizzard replaced with heavy rain. The conspiracy plot and the flashbacks to Max's past are replaced with the love story and a rivalry between the Russian and Italian mafia that Max gets embroiled up in, alongside returning characters Mona Sax and Vladimir Lem.
You fucking pay for this Russian, you fucking pay!
There's lots of recurring environments and thematic elements meant to kind of trick your brain into connecting with the story, and it does. It's a trek through familiar territory that explores relationships between the three main characters and attempts to develop them further than it did in the prequel.
Max, dearest of all my friends.
Mona Sax fills in the role of the love interest in the game, which is interesting because she really only had a small role in the first game, and her arrival in this game doesn't really get explained all that much.
Max, we gotta stop meeting like this.
Ultimately, they're drawn together involving events with Russian mafia leader Vladimir Lem and the death of one of Max's colleagues named Detective Winters. The narrative once again jumps back and forth across the span of a few days, and there's even a section where you play as Mona, during a short tenure where you have to cover Max as he makes his escape from a construction site. However, the game has much less to do with Max as a character overall compared to the first game, where the story was very much centered around his past and the events that led to his mental downfall. Even though it's called The Fall of Max Payne, it's really just something of a simple crime story with a few plot twists to keep it interesting. But anyway, saying much more about the plot would really give too much away, and it's really one of those things that is much more enjoyable uncovered as you progress through the game naturally. I'll just say that it has the same tongue-in-cheek tone, dramatic dialogue, and stylish graphic novel-style cinematics that made the first game so unique. Though I'm not fond of who turns out to ultimately become the villain, as this is something I think again was done more out of convenience than it was as a progression of that character. Also, despite the common occurrence of these cinematics, I never found myself wanting to skip them, though you can do so if you wish, and overall they're just very well thrown together.
It's yours, Payne. It makes no sense.
Now, Max Payne 2 controls like your standard third-person shooter, being smooth and responsive whilst accurate aim is encouraged over just shooting like a moron. As before, the primary enemies are just guys with guns. Initially, you're up against a mysterious crew of mercenaries masquerading as cleaners, and the rest of the lineup in the game is an assortment of assholes and degenerates with similar weapons. Shotguns, assault rifles, and Desert Eagles, which can now be dual-wielded. The weapons again function as a cross between hit scanning and projectile. Weapons will have slight delays on hitting their target depending on the weapon type and how far you are away from what you're shooting at. Mostly it functions the same as before, but the only real difference is, as I said, the ability to dual wield Desert Eagles, which may be the most effective weapon combination in the game. There's a few new weapons also in the form of an AK-47, an MP5, and a faster firing sniper rifle as well. Lastly, the grenades and molotovs can now be selected as a secondary weapon and thrown with the press of the middle mouse button, as opposed to having selected manually as a standalone weapon. But hands down, the biggest change in the game is what they've done to the bullet time system. Now, the two main abilities you've still got are simply activating bullet time, which just allows you to move around, aim and shoot, or the shoot dodge, where you leap left, right, front or backwards, firing at the same time. In addition to the shoot dodge, now allows you to keep firing after you've hit the ground, which is handy if you still have bad guys shooting at you. But the major change they've made is how bullet time now affects the way time behaves overall. Looking back at Max Payne 1, the bullet time ability was an extension of Max's reflexes. Time would practically come to a stop, but you could still aim in real time, allowing for precise shots under pressure. It had to be used sparingly, and it was refilled when you killed a certain amount of enemies. But now in Max Payne 2, bullet time recharges over time, and instead of it bringing time to a stop, now it actually permits you to move around at normal speed. With every enemy you kill, the hourglass changes colour, slowing down time even more, but allowing you to move faster. It's no longer a reflex, it's a superpower. It can essentially get to the point where you're moving around normally, but everyone else is basically frozen in place. Now at this point, when you reload a weapon, the game does this kind of 360 spin around Max as he reloads, allowing you to seamlessly continue your rampage. It isn't realistic in the slightest. In fact, if you stop to think about it, what Max is basically doing is killing a room of bad guys before his shell casings have even hit the floor. I mean, the speed he must be moving at is just superhuman. What this largely does is change the pace of the game, almost encouraging you to blast your way through gunfights as fast as possible. It becomes a sort of challenge to see how many guys you can take out sequentially, and it does really put the gameplay in a league of its own. You know, Max Payne 1 was at times slow, deliberate, and precise. You know, you timed your shoot dodges so that you weren't left in the lurch, and you had to be mindful of how much bullet time you had left in heavy gunfights. Max Payne 2, on the other hand, is more fast-paced, with a higher enemy count and with a much greater focus and even dependence on the bullet time skill as an extension to the gameplay. It also features downright ludicrous physics where enemies can literally be sent into the sky from gunfire, as the powered-up bullet time hourglass invokes logic-defying properties. Max Payne 3 would eventually bring this bullet time mechanic closer to what it was like in the first game. And what this ultimately means is that Max Payne 2 is really the black sheep of the bunch. Does this make it bad? Well, no, it doesn't, but it is a far cry from the first game and often quite juxtaposed to the gritty tone of the story and the setting. I mean, it's a bit jarring when you just come from a cinematic where the main characters are all in some kind of standoff, you know, allegiances are being questioned and betrayals come to light, and then minutes later, you're launching bad guys into the stratosphere with an automatic shotgun. Love or hate it, you can't argue this is a fantastic looking game, even a decade later. The image is crisp, sharp, and polished with incredible texture work that really does still hold up. The character models are detailed, the weapons just look great, and the sound and music are all incredible, with the voice acting once again really stealing the show.
Did you do it? You killed her!
It seems they also managed to hire professionals to sit in for the cinematics this time, and it does add an element of production value that was really lacking in the first game. This was also one of the first games to start using a physics engine before Half-Life 2 came out, and almost every single prop in the game world can be moved around when shot at, or at least bumped into, which makes for some great eye candy during heavy gunfights. Then you've got the return of those very meta TV shows that pop up in the game world, playing on various television sets scattered around the environment, kind of reflecting the narrative in this very twisted and comical way.
Allow me. Mama, I drink to the memory of my brother. My lady, I drink for you.
People who've played the first game will know what I'm talking about. You know, Lords and Ladies, for instance, and Address Unknown. The latter even having an in-game amusement park dedicated to its memory.
We're forced to operate.
Now, the only outright issue I have with this game is its length. I mean, it's short, you know, like 5 or 6 hours short, maybe even less on a second playthrough. There are numerous difficulty modes to play around with, and the hardest difficulty mode even unlocks a secret ending, but it still is quite a brisk game, which kinda sucks. I never noticed much difference in the difficulty in any of these games either. I mean, you seem to die really quickly regardless of what difficulty you're on, so the challenge is about the same either way. Is it better than the first game though? Now look, I think there's such different games that it's not quite that black and white. Max Payne 2 definitely tells a better story and has better production values, but then on the other hand, the shooting is so over the top, you'd be forgiven for thinking it's an entirely different game series. And I can understand if people don't like it as much as they did the first game. But when you put everything together, there's very little worth complaining about here, and Max Payne 2 is still one of the best third-person shooting games of its era. And it has some incredibly cinematic and enjoyable gunfights that are still just great fun to play to this day. Out of the entire series, it's Max Payne 3 that seemed to divide fans the most, and in the next video, Sunny Jim, that's the game we're going to be taking a look at.